The story of Lisa Holm is a haunting case that sent shockwaves through Sweden and captured international attention. A young girl with a bright future vanished without a trace, leaving her family and an entire nation in anguish. What began as a routine evening commute from work quickly spiraled into one of the largest and most intense search operations in Sweden's modern history. Thousands of volunteers and law enforcement officers rallied together in a desperate bid to find her. As clues surfaced, a chilling picture began to form, unraveling the grim fate that had befallen Lisa. This case not only highlighted the power of community efforts, but also revealed the dark and sinister actions of a killer hiding in plain sight. What really happened to Lisa Holm? And how did the relentless pursuit of justice finally uncover the truth? Stay with us as we delve into this tragic case that continues to resonate deeply with all who hear it. Lisa Holm, born on February 7, 1998, in a serene Swedish town, grew up surrounded by love and tranquility. Known for her kind heart, positivity, and determination, Lisa was a bright young girl with dreams of studying architecture in Australia, a goal she set for herself even before finishing school. She loved traveling and often accompanied her parents on trips to different countries, which fueled her ambition and broadened her horizons. By the summer of 2015, at the age of 17, Lisa was already proving her independence. She had taken on part-time jobs during her teenage years and recently secured her first serious position at a cafe located 40 minutes from her home. While the job was challenging, Lisa embraced it enthusiastically, proud of her growing independence and ability to support herself. Lisa lived with her parents and older sister in a peaceful, tight-knit community. Her father, a devoted and protective figure in her life, played an essential role in helping her transition to adulthood. When Lisa started working at the cafe, he drove her there and back each weekend, ensuring she was safe. Lisa's life, full of promise and awe, was about to take a devastating turn, forever changing her family's world and leaving an indelible mark on Sweden's history. As Lisa gained confidence riding in her scooter, her father finally allowed her to commute to the cafe on her own. The gift of the scooter symbolized a new chapter in Lisa's life, marking her growing independence. However, her father, ever the protective parent, remained cautious. For weeks, he accompanied her on the route, ensuring she was comfortable navigating the roads. By early June 2015, he felt reassured enough to let her make the trip alone. June 7, 2015 began like any other weekend workday for Lisa. The cafe where she worked was bustling with customers, and Lisa was busy managing her responsibilities. Around midday, her parents decided to visit her at the cafe, sharing a meal and a brief moment together. It was a small but cherished family tradition, and Lisa seemed her usual cheerful self. After lunch, her parents returned home, leaving Lisa to finish her shift. Neither could have imagined it would be the last time they saw her alive. Lisa's day at work continued as normal. By the end of her shift, she tidied up and prepared to leave for home. At 6:23 p.m., she texted her father, "Leaving now." It was her first solo trip back, and her father trusted she would manage fine. Just 3 minutes later, at 6:26 p.m., Lisa's father received an unexpected call from her number. When he answered, there was no response. Instead, he heard faint background noises, indistinct voices, and, most unsettlingly, the sound of a car door slamming shut. Thinking it might have been an accidental call, her father repeatedly called out Lisa's name, but no one answered. The line eventually disconnected, leaving him with a vague sense of unease. He tried to shake it off, reasoning that Lisa might be chatting with colleagues as she prepared to leave, but an uneasy feeling lingered. As time passed and Lisa failed to arrive home, worry began to settle in. Her father, already uneasy from the earlier call, knew something wasn't right. This was unlike Lisa, who was dependable and quick to inform her family if she was delayed. With every passing moment, the unease deepened, setting the stage for a night of desperate searching that would lead to unimaginable heartbreak. As the evening wore on and Lisa Holm failed to return home, her father's initial concern turned to alarm. At first, he thought she might have encountered trouble with her scooter or gotten delayed. Determined to find her, he set out to trace the route she would have taken from the cafe to their house. Driving slowly, he scanned every corner of the road, looking for any sign of an accident or anything that could explain why she hadn't arrived home. The trip, however, revealed nothing. No sign of Lisa, no fallen scooter, no indication of where she might be. His unease grew heavier as he approached the cafe. When he pulled into the parking lot, his heart dropped. there was Lisa's scooter, parked neatly as though she had never left. Her helmet hung from the handlebars, and the keys were still in the ignition. This discovery was not reassuring. It was deeply unsettling. Lisa would never have left her scooter like this, and the sight immediately raised the alarm that something was terribly wrong. Desperately, her father searched the cafe and its surroundings. He walked through the building calling her name, but there was no response. The cafe was completely empty, adding to his panic. Hoping for answers, Lisa's mother called the cafe owner, who quickly rushed to the scene. The owner, now equally concerned, gathered several friends who lived nearby to assist in the search. Together, the small group began combing the parking lot, nearby fields, and wooded areas, hoping to find some clue to Lisa's whereabouts. As they scoured the area, Lisa's mother and older sister decided to check the bus stop in their hometown. Perhaps Lisa, for reasons unknown, had taken the bus instead of riding her scooter. The family's hopes rose briefly, but when the bus arrived, Lisa was not on board. The passengers disembarking had no information, and no one had seen a girl matching Lisa's description. By now it was late, and darkness had fallen over the town. The family realized this was no ordinary delay. Lisa was truly missing. At this point, they contacted the police, who responded immediately. A disappearance like this was highly unusual in their quiet and safe community, and authorities understood the urgency of the situation. The initial police efforts were extensive. Officers brought in tracking dogs and deployed search teams to nearby fields and wooded areas. Investigators knocked on doors in the area surrounding the cafe, questioning residents for any signs of unusual activity. However, the initial search yielded no answers. News of Lisa's disappearance spread rapidly through the community, and her friends and classmates took to social media, sharing photos and information. Their posts were shared widely, quickly gaining national attention. By the next morning, hundreds of volunteers had arrived to join the search. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers rallied together, determined to help find the missing teenager. The search continued to grow, becoming the largest search operation in Sweden's modern history. Over 1,000 volunteers, some traveling from distant towns, poured into the area, searching fields, forests, ditches, and roads. Teams worked in shifts to ensure the effort was continuous. Local organizations provided food, water, and other supplies to keep the searchers going. The sheer scale of the operation reflected the unity and determination of the community to find Lisa and bring her home. Despite the extraordinary effort and coordination, there was still no sign of Lisa. As hours turned to days, hope began to waver, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Clues started to emerge, suggesting that Lisa's disappearance was not just a case of getting lost or a simple accident. Something far more sinister had happened, and the search for a missing teenager began to turn into the hunt for the truth behind a terrible crime. The search for Lisa Holm, initially filled with hope, began uncovering disturbing clues that hinted at a tragic end. On the second day of the operation, volunteers searching the area around the cafe discovered personal items scattered along a dirt road about 300 meters away. Among these were Lisa's phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and pieces of her broken smartphone screen. The trail of belongings appeared as if they had been deliberately discarded, leading investigators to suspect Lisa had been taken along this road by her abductor. The dirt road eventually brought searchers to a barn directly across from the cafe, a location that quickly became a focal point of the investigation. A worker at the barn reported finding a motorcycle glove on the floor. Police immediately showed the glove to Lisa's parents, who confirmed it belonged to their daughter. The barn was thoroughly examined, and while it initially yielded no significant leads, additional searches soon revealed more unsettling findings. Forensic experts discovered a pair of earrings near the floor, later identified as Lisa's. Nearby, they came across a curious and disturbing clue: human feces. While it might have seemed unrelated at first, forensic specialists suggested that the feces could have been left by the perpetrator in a moment of intense adrenaline-fueled stress. Adrenaline surges during crimes can sometimes cause individuals to lose control of their bodily functions. This strange clue, combined with Lisa's glove and earrings, led police to strongly suspect that she had been brought to the barn after her abduction. The investigation gained momentum as search efforts expanded to surrounding areas. On a farm about 2 miles from the cafe, volunteers noticed an abandoned trailer tucked away behind tall grass. Its appearance suggested it had not been used in years, but the flattened grass around it indicated recent activity. Investigators, sensing its importance, forced the trailer's rusted door open. Inside, they were met with a foul, unmistakable odor of decay. The trailer contained several old lockers, previously used as storage for workers' belongings. Most of the lockers were sealed shut, except for one that was slightly ajar. Hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags was Lisa's lifeless body. The scene was harrowing. Lisa had been strangled with a rope, which was still around her neck. Her head was tightly wrapped in tape, and her clothing was disheveled, with her pants pulled down and her shirt pushed up. While the state of her clothing suggested the possibility of sexual assault, forensic analysis later confirmed that no such act had occurred. Forensic specialists began carefully documenting the crime scene. The rope used to strangle Lisa was a key piece of evidence, as were traces of DNA found on her clothing and the tape. Investigators hypothesized that Lisa had been killed elsewhere, likely at the barn, and her body was later moved to the trailer. As news of Lisa's death broke, the community was overcome with grief. The case, which had gripped Sweden as a desperate search for a missing teenager, had now turned into a murder investigation. The discovery of Lisa's body, coupled with the growing body of evidence, pointed to a carefully planned and heinous crime. Investigators were now focused on piecing together Lisa's final moments and uncovering the identity of the person responsible for her tragic death. As the search for Lisa Holm turned into a murder investigation, the police zeroed in on 3 individuals who lived and worked near the crime scenes: Nerijus Bilavicius, his younger brother, and Nerijus's wife. They were Lithuanian immigrants living in a modest house along the same dirt road where Lisa's belongings had been discovered. The brothers worked in the barn near the cafe and at the farm where Lisa's body was eventually found, tying them directly to the locations that had become central to the case. Initially, Nerijus presented himself as an ordinary worker, cooperative and seemingly concerned about the tragic events unfolding in the community. When questioned, he calmly claimed that he had been at home on the evening of Lisa's disappearance, asleep until around 8 p.m., when he left briefly to buy cigarettes and pizza at a nearby gas station. His wife and younger brother supported this story, offering a united front in his defense. But as the investigators began to piece together evidence, the cracks in this facade became glaringly obvious. Forensic experts meticulously combed through the barn, the trailer where Lisa's body was found, and the surrounding areas. What they uncovered painted a grim and damning picture of Nerijus's involvement. The first blow to Nerijus's claims came when DNA testing revealed traces of his DNA on Lisa's clothing, including her jacket and underwear. This evidence was impossible to explain away. It suggested direct contact with Lisa during the hours of her disappearance. The rope used to strangle Lisa provided further proof. Forensic tests confirmed it carried both Lisa's DNA and Nerijus's, tying him directly to the murder weapon. Additionally, a matching piece of the rope was discovered in the barn, linking the crime scene to where Nerijus worked. The barn itself became a haunting site of discovery. In an observation room overlooking the cafe, investigators found male bodily fluids on the walls and floor. These samples, tested multiple times for accuracy, were confirmed to belong to Nerijus. This room, with its large window, had given him a clear view of the cafe's employees, including Lisa. It was here detectives theorized that he had fixated on her over time. Another chilling clue was found in the same barn: human feces, left in a corner of the floor. Though seemingly unrelated at first, forensic experts matched the DNA to Nerijus. Psychologists assisting the case explained that such behavior could result from the overwhelming adrenaline rush during or immediately after committing a violent crime, further implicating him in the horrific events. Witness testimonies added weight to the mounting evidence. A jogger who had been running near the cafe on the day of Lisa's disappearance recalled being stopped by a man who matched Nerijus's description. Speaking in English, he had asked for directions to a place she didn't recognize. When she offered to show him using her phone, he insisted she get into his car to help with his GPS. Feeling uneasy, she refused and quickly ran away. Other witnesses reported seeing a car resembling Nerijus's vehicle driving near the cafe during the critical hours of Lisa's disappearance. This directly contradicted his claim that he had been at home the entire evening. Nerijus's alibi initially seemed airtight. His wife and younger brother both vouched for him, stating he had been home and asleep until he left for a brief errand. But under mounting pressure from investigators, the younger brother finally broke. He admitted that Nerijus had not been home for several hours during the critical time frame. He confessed that Narigis had returned late that evening, covered in dirt and acting strangely. He also revealed that when police first arrived to question them, Narigis had whispered to him, "Tell them I was home." This admission shattered Narigis's alibi and exposed the lengths to which he and his family had gone to cover up his actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Narigis continued to maintain his innocence. His lawyer attempted to argue that the DNA found in the barn and on Lisa's clothing could have been transferred accidentally due to his work in those locations. However, this argument crumbled under scrutiny, particularly in the case of the DNA found inside Lisa's underwear and on the rope used to strangle her. The case against Narigis Bilovicius was now undeniable. The evidence told a harrowing story, that of a man who had watched Lisa from afar, plotted his attack, and taken her life in a calculated and horrific act of violence. His attempt to hide behind lies and fabricated alibis had failed, and the truth of his actions had come to light. As the evidence mounted, the community that had rallied so valiantly to find Lisa was left reeling. What had started as a desperate search for a missing teenager had turned into a grim revelation of a heinous crime. Lisa's family, who had clung to hope for her safe return, now had to face the unbearable reality of her loss. The air of unity and hope that had driven the search was now replaced by grief and a burning demand for justice. The nation watched as the net closed around Narigis, knowing that his conviction would not bring Lisa back, but would at least ensure he could never harm anyone else. For the investigators and prosecutors, it was now a matter of ensuring that every piece of evidence was irrefutable. They built an airtight case, driven not just by their professional duty, but by the memory of Lisa, a young woman whose life had been stolen far too soon. As the trial approached, the pieces of the puzzle came together, and Narigis's lies lay in ruins, unable to withstand the weight of the truth. The road to justice was long and filled with heartbreak, but Lisa's story had to be told, her voice carried forward by those who loved her and the community that refused to let her memory fade. The trial of Narigis Bilovicius began 4 months after Lisa Holmes' murder, drawing intense public attention across Sweden. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against him, including DNA found on Lisa's clothing, the rope used to strangle her, and traces of bodily fluids in the barn's observation room where he had been watching the cafe. Witness testimonies placed his car near the cafe at critical times, and his younger brother's confession dismantled the false alibi that Narigis had constructed with his family. In court, Narigis maintained his innocence, claiming that his DNA in the barn was a result of his work there and arguing that any DNA on Lisa's clothing could have been transferred indirectly. His lawyer even attempted to suggest the possibility of evidence tampering by Narigis's brother, but these claims were dismissed as implausible. The presence of Narigis's DNA inside Lisa's underwear and on the murder weapon was undeniable and could only be explained by direct contact during the crime. After a month-long trial, Narigis Bilovicius was convicted of Lisa Holmes' murder and sentenced to life imprisonment in Sweden. The verdict was a rare and severe sentence in a country known for its leniency, reflecting the horrific nature of the crime. For Lisa's family and the nation, the conviction brought some measure of closure, though the pain of losing Lisa could never be erased. In 2017, Narigis requested a transfer to a Lithuanian prison, seeking to be closer to his homeland. Swedish authorities approved the transfer, but his decision came with severe consequences. Lithuanian prisons were far harsher than the comparatively humane Swedish system. While in Lithuania, Narigis attempted to appeal his life sentence, and for a brief period it was reduced to 15 years. However, this decision was overturned, reinstating his life imprisonment. 5 years after his transfer, in August 2022, Narigis met a violent end in the Lithuanian prison system. During a routine transfer of inmates between blocks, he was attacked by another prisoner wielding a makeshift weapon. The attack left Narigis with critical injuries, and he died while being transported to the hospital. The death of Narigis Bilovicius marked the end of a dark chapter in the aftermath of Lisa Holmes' murder. While justice had been served in court, the pain and loss endured by Lisa's family and loved ones remained immeasurable. Her case continues to stand as a solemn reminder of the importance of perseverance in the pursuit of justice. The murder of Lisa Holmes sent shockwaves through Sweden, a country known for its low rates of violent crime. Her tragic story brought attention to the vulnerabilities that can exist even in peaceful and close-knit communities. It forced a nation to confront the stark reality that such horrific acts could happen anywhere and to anyone. At the same time, the case showcased the extraordinary power of community mobilization. Over 1,000 volunteers from across Sweden joined the largest search operation in the country's modern history, demonstrating solidarity and determination in the face of tragedy. Their efforts underscored the importance of collective action in the search for justice and closure. Despite the conviction of Nerijus Bilavicius, lingering questions remain about the possible involvement of his wife and younger brother. Although no direct evidence implicated them in the abduction or murder, their roles in providing false alibis raised doubts about whether they knew more than they admitted. These unanswered questions continue to add complexity to an already harrowing case. Lisa Holmes' case stands as a painful reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of violence. While justice was ultimately served with the conviction of her murderer, it came at the unbearable cost of a young, promising life full of dreams and potential. This story is a call to action for communities to remain vigilant, proactive, and united in efforts to prevent such tragedies from recurring. By staying alert and supporting search and safety initiatives, we can honor Lisa's memory and protect others from similar fates. If you found this story meaningful, please like, subscribe, and share to ensure more people hear Lisa's story and understand the importance of coming together in times of need. Let us keep her memory alive and continue striving for a safer world. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today, we're diving into a tragic and haunting case that shook all of Sweden. It's a story of obsession, heartbreak, and brutal violence. One that will undoubtedly make you cry. In 2008, the peaceful life of Emma Ljungstig, a mother of two, was shattered by one of the most horrifying crimes in Swedish history. This case gripped the entire nation, and even now its brutality and tragedy continue to resonate. In psychology, there's a term called Adolphe syndrome, named after the daughter of the famous French writer Victor Hugo. This syndrome describes a dangerous form of obsession where one person becomes so fixated on another that they lose control over their emotions. Sometimes this kind of obsession can lead individuals to do desperate and violent things. Unfortunately, the case we're discussing today is a chilling example of just how far obsession can push someone. Emma Ljungstig was born on February 16, 1985 in Stockholm, Sweden. She grew up in a modest family as the younger of two daughters, living a typical childhood in the city. Her older sister, Kathina, was always by her side, and the two shared a close bond throughout their early years. Emma's life seemed to follow a normal course until she met Nicholas, the man who would later become her husband. At just 19 years old, Emma married Nicholas, a young man she had been dating since high school. Their relationship, though young and passionate, soon became complicated as they started their family. Emma gave birth to their first child, a son named Max, at the age of 20. Just a year and a half later, they welcomed a daughter, Saga. Although they were blessed with two beautiful children, the realities of family life soon began to weigh on the young couple. Emma and Nicholas, still in their early 20s, found themselves struggling with the pressures of raising a family while they were both still trying to figure out their own lives. Financial difficulties and the stress of everyday life created tension between them. They constantly argued, often over trivial matters, and over time, their relationship began to deteriorate. By the time their daughter Saga was born, the couple had reached a breaking point. They could no longer see eye to eye and decided to separate. Their split, however, was far from amicable. Disagreements over custody of the children added to the strain. While both Emma and Nicholas loved Max and Saga deeply, they couldn't agree on how to co-parent. This led to numerous legal battles, with each parent fighting for sole custody, setting the stage for the tragic events that would later unfold. After her separation from Nicholas, Emma sought a fresh start. In the midst of the emotional and legal turmoil surrounding the custody of her two children, Max and Saga, she met Torny Hellberg through an online forum. Torny was a kind and understanding man, and despite the challenges Emma faced as a young mother, the two quickly bonded. Their relationship moved fast, and soon Emma decided to leave Stockholm and relocate to a small town called Aruga, about 150 kilometers away, where Torny lived. She took her children with her, hoping for a new beginning. However, Nicholas was not happy with this decision. He objected strongly to Emma moving the children so far away, arguing that it would prevent him from seeing Max and Saga regularly. This fueled even more custody battles, with Nicholas fighting to keep his children close. Despite his efforts, Emma was determined to build a life with Torny, and the legal struggles between her and Nicholas intensified. Torny, though aware of the difficulties, accepted Emma and her children wholeheartedly. He had always dreamed of having a family and was ready to embrace Max and Saga as his own. The couple initially lived in a small house that Torny had inherited, which they quickly made into a cozy home. Although things were far from perfect, their love for each other and the children gave them hope for the future. In the summer of 2008, Emma and Torny had plans to get married. They envisioned a simple but meaningful ceremony with close family and friends. Life seemed to be falling into place for Emma, despite the ongoing struggles with Nicholas. She looked forward to a peaceful life with her new partner, but fate had something much darker in store for the young family. On March 17, 2008, the day began like any other for Emma Youngstig. Torny Hellberg left early in the morning for work, while Emma stayed home with their children, 3-year-old Max and 1.5-year-old Saga. It was an ordinary Monday in their quiet life, filled with typical household tasks and caring for the children. Emma had plans to prepare dinner for the family that evening and was looking forward to Torny's return from work. Little did she know that by the end of the day, her life would be shattered beyond repair. As the evening approached, Emma continued with her daily routine. At around 6:30 p.m., she received a call from Torny, who was running late from work. He assured her that everything was fine and suggested that she and the children go ahead and have dinner without him. Emma agreed and continued to tend to the kids in the house. A little later, she sat down at her computer to chat with her older sister, Kathina, discussing plans for their parents' upcoming wedding anniversary. The conversation was light and casual, with Emma texting back and forth while juggling her responsibilities as a mother. Then, at exactly 7:07 p.m., their communication was abruptly cut off. Emma was in the middle of typing a message, but it never got sent. Kathina noticed the sudden silence and felt an immediate sense of unease. She called Emma's phone, but there was no answer. Thinking perhaps Emma had gotten distracted by the children, Kathina tried to shake off the feeling of dread. Still concerned, she reached out to Torny, who was on his way home. He reassured her, saying that Emma was likely busy and that everything was fine. He was only minutes away from the house and would check on things when he arrived. At 7:20 p.m., just 13 minutes after Emma's last message, Torny arrived at the house. As he approached, he noticed that the front door was slightly ajar. At first, he didn't think much of it, assuming that Emma might have left it open while looking after the children. But as he stepped inside, he was greeted by an unsettling silence. The usual noise of the children playing or Emma bustling about was absent. Something felt wrong. Torny called out for Emma, Max, and Saga, but there was no response. As he walked further into the house, he began to notice a mess. Furniture was overturned, and toys were scattered. At first, he thought the children had been playing rough, but then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Dark red stains on the floor. His mind raced as he tried to process what he was seeing. The stains were unmistakably blood, and panic set in. In the hallway, Torny spotted what he initially thought was a doll lying on the floor in a twisted, unnatural position. But as he got closer, he realized in horror that it was little Saga lying in a pool of her own blood. Her face was brutally disfigured beyond recognition. Nearby, Max's lifeless body lay in a similar state, with a fractured skull. Both children had been savagely attacked. Torny's heart sank as he frantically searched for Emma, hoping against hope that she was still alive. He found her collapsed on the floor, covered in blood, her face shattered and body motionless. Shaking with fear and disbelief, Torny pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed the emergency number. His voice barely held together as he reported what he had found. Paramedics and police arrived on the scene within minutes. The sight that awaited them was horrifying. Emma and her children had been attacked with a level of violence that was beyond comprehension. Blood spattered the floors and walls, and the house was in disarray. Miraculously, when paramedics checked the victims, they found faint pulses in all three. Despite their severe injuries, Emma, Max, and Saga were clinging to life. The paramedics rushed to stabilize them and transported them to the nearest hospital. Emma had been placed in a medically induced coma to give her body a chance to heal. Max and Saga, however, were in critical condition. The doctors held little hope for the children's survival, given the extent of their brain injuries and the massive blood loss they had suffered. Even if they could be saved, they would likely never regain their normal function. As the medical teams fought to save the victims, forensic experts began their investigation at the scene. The chaotic state of the house, combined with the presence of the paramedics, made it difficult to piece together exactly what had happened. There were no clear signs of forced entry, and the only possible clue was that the front door had been left unlocked, indicating that Emma may have known her attacker and willingly let them in. By the end of that harrowing night, the lives of 3 people had been irreversibly changed. Max and Saga, despite all efforts to save them, succumbed to their injuries and passed away without regaining consciousness. Emma, barely hanging on to life, became the only survivor of the brutal attack, left to face the unimaginable loss of her children and the horror of what had happened in their once peaceful home. While the doctors fought to keep Emma alive, the police began their investigation into the horrific crime. With no clear signs of forced entry and no immediate witnesses, the authorities initially focused their attention on those closest to Emma. The first person they questioned was Torny Hellberg, Emma's fiancé. After all, it was he who had discovered the crime scene, and in many cases, the person closest to the victims is considered a primary suspect. Torny, still in shock from the events he had witnessed, cooperated fully with the police. He recounted the timeline of his day, explaining how he had been at work and only arrived home around 7:20 p.m., just minutes after Emma's communication with her sister had abruptly stopped. The police interrogated him thoroughly, searching for any inconsistencies in his story. Torny's emotions were raw. He was visibly distraught and struggled to come to terms with the loss of the children and the brutal attack on Emma. However, as the investigation continued, Torny's alibi was confirmed. His boss and co-workers testified that he had indeed been at work during the time of the crime. Moreover, surveillance footage from multiple cameras captured him walking through the streets on his way home at the time of the attacks. With a solid alibi and no motive, the police cleared him as a suspect and released him. Despite Torny's innocence, the cloud of suspicion initially placed on him only added to his grief. Not only had he lost Max and Saga, 2 children he had grown to love as his own, but Emma, the woman he planned to marry, was still fighting for her life. The future they had been building together had been destroyed in a matter of minutes. Emma's family, especially her sister Kathina, was also devastated. The loss of Max and Saga, combined with Emma's critical condition, left the family shattered. As the days passed, the investigation intensified. The police were determined to uncover the truth and bring the perpetrator to justice. They scoured the crime scene for clues, analyzed forensic evidence, and conducted interviews with anyone who might have had contact with Emma in the days leading up to the attack. The brutality of the crime suggested a deep personal motive, but the lack of obvious suspects left the investigation at a standstill. For Emma's family and Torny, the pain of losing Max and Saga was unbearable. The grief-stricken family could do little but wait for answers, hoping that justice would soon be served and that the person responsible for the heinous crime would be caught. With Torny Hellberg cleared as a suspect, the police turned their attention to another possible source of conflict in Emma's life, her ex-husband, Nicholas. Given the contentious history between Emma and Nicholas, particularly over the custody of their children, Max and Saga, it was natural for the investigators to consider him a potential suspect. The ongoing legal battles over custody had created significant tension between the two, and Emma had previously reported threats made by Nicholas to the police, raising suspicions that he could have been driven to commit such a heinous crime. Nicholas had struggled to come to terms with the fact that Emma had moved away with their children. The long distance between him and his kids made it difficult for him to see Max and Saga regularly, further fueling the animosity between him and Emma. In court, Nicholas had fought hard for more access to his children, and the custody disputes were both emotionally draining and bitter. These circumstances, coupled with the fact that Nicholas had made threats toward Emma, made him an immediate person of interest. When the police questioned Nicholas about his whereabouts on the night of the attack, his initial reaction was one of shock and disbelief. He appeared genuinely devastated upon hearing about the deaths of Mac and Saga, repeatedly asking if there had been some mistake. Despite the tension in their relationship, Nicholas had always maintained that he loved his children dearly and would never harm them. Nevertheless, the investigators pursued their line of questioning, digging into Nicholas's activities on the day of the crime. He insisted that he had been away on business at the time of the attack, a claim that initially seemed suspicious due to its timing. However, as the investigation unfolded, Nicholas's alibi was corroborated. Witnesses confirmed that he had been in a different city, approximately 120 miles away from the scene of the crime, during the time of the murders. Additionally, hotel records and CCTV footage provided concrete evidence of his whereabouts. Despite the suspicions stemming from his previous threats and the bitter custody battle, Nicholas's alibi left no room for doubt. He had been far from the crime scene when the brutal attack took place. Reluctantly, the police were forced to clear him of any direct involvement in the murders. Though he was not involved in the physical crime, the lingering bitterness and the emotional toll of the custody fight between him and Emma remained a key part of the background leading up to the tragic events. With Nicholas ruled out as a suspect, the investigation once again hit a roadblock. The authorities were left grappling with the question of who could have committed such a brutal crime and why. The lack of physical evidence and the complexity of Emma's personal life meant that the investigation had to continue exploring every possible angle in order to uncover the truth behind the horrific murders of Max and Saga and the attempted murder of Emma. As the investigation continued, and both Torny Hellberg and Nicholas were cleared of suspicion, the police were left searching for another potential suspect. That's when a new lead emerged: Torny's ex-girlfriend, Christina Schurer. Torny had not initially mentioned Christina to the police, but when investigators reviewed surveillance footage near the crime scene, they noticed a suspicious figure. The footage showed a person dressed in black with a hood obscuring their face, walking near Emma and Torny's house shortly before the murders took place. The person appeared to be petite and frail, leading some to speculate that the figure could be a woman. When Torny was shown the footage, he grew pale. Almost immediately, he recognized the figure's build and mannerisms as those of Christina Schurer, his ex-girlfriend from several years ago. Despite the time that had passed since they ended their relationship, Christina had remained fixated on Torny, displaying disturbing, obsessive behavior that escalated as the years went on. Christina Schurer had a troubled past. Born in Hanover, Germany in 1977, her childhood had been marked by emotional turmoil. Her father left the family when she was young, causing deep emotional scars that would affect her relationships later in life. Christina grew up to be intelligent and ambitious, excelling in her studies in history and archaeology. She traveled extensively throughout Europe, participating in archaeological expeditions, and for a while lived in New York as part of an exchange program. But beneath her professional success, Christina struggled with emotional instability, and those closest to her often saw her darker side. In the summer of 2006, Christina met Torny while working as a tour guide on the Greek island of Crete. Torny, then on vacation, found her intelligent and charming at first. They began a romantic relationship, but soon after, Torny began to notice troubling signs. Christina was overly possessive and controlling, and when their relationship started to break down, she refused to let go. Even after Torny ended the relationship in early 2007, Christina wouldn't accept it. She continued to call and write to him, insisting that they should be together. Her behavior grew more erratic over time, with Christina even threatening self-harm if Torny didn't take her back. One of the most alarming incidents occurred when Christina falsely claimed to be pregnant with Torny's child. She contacted him out of the blue, saying that she had given birth to a son and placed him with a foster family. Torny, already skeptical due to their long separation, asked her for details, but her answers were vague and inconsistent. After investigating the matter himself, Torny discovered that the entire story had been fabricated. Christina's desperation to rekindle their relationship, even through lies, only deepened Torny's resolve to keep his distance from her. Despite Torny's attempts to cut her out of his life, Christina's obsession continued. She stalked him online, collecting photos of him and his new life with Emma. Police found a folder on Christina's laptop filled with pictures of Torny, Emma, and their children, which she had taken from their social media profiles. The photos were accompanied by disturbing captions, filled with anger and jealousy. Her fixation on Torny, coupled with the bitter jealousy she harbored toward Emma, led her to plot the horrific crime that would forever alter their lives. On the day of the attack, Christina had traveled to Emma and Torny's home. concealing herself in dark clothing to avoid detection. She waited for the right moment, entering the house shortly after Emma's last message to her sister. Fueled by her delusional obsession with Torny and her deep hatred for Emma, Christina carried out the brutal attack with a hammer, leaving the family in a pool of blood. The discovery of Christina's obsession, along with the incriminating evidence found on her devices, led investigators to conclude that she was the one responsible for the murders of Max and Saga, as well as the attempted murder of Emma. Christina's fixation on Torny had spiraled into a deadly rage, turning her into a cold and calculating killer who stopped at nothing to eliminate the family she believed stood in the way of her twisted fantasy. With the mounting evidence against Christina Schur, the police moved swiftly to arrest her. The discovery of surveillance footage showing a figure matching Christina's description near the crime scene was a major breakthrough. Combined with the obsessive photos found on her laptop, which depicted Emma, Torny, and their children, the investigators had a solid case linking Christina to the brutal murders. The photos were accompanied by disturbing and threatening captions that revealed the depth of her jealousy and rage toward Emma. This evidence clearly pointed to her unhealthy obsession with Torny and her intent to destroy his new family. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Christina initially denied any involvement in the crime. When the police arrested her in Germany and brought her back to Sweden, she claimed that there had been a terrible mistake. She insisted that she had nothing to do with the massacre and that she hadn't even been near the crime scene on the night of the murders. However, the investigators weren't convinced. They had established her presence near Emma and Torny's house through both the surveillance footage and witness testimonies from neighbors who had seen a figure in dark clothing walking around suspiciously that evening. As Christina was brought to trial, her behavior grew increasingly erratic. In court, she maintained her innocence, but exhibited strange and unnerving conduct. She often smiled inappropriately, waved at people in the courtroom, and at one point even laughed when shown the gruesome crime scene photos of Emma and her children. Her unsettling reactions led some to question her mental state. It seemed as though she was disconnected from the gravity of the situation and the horrific crime she was accused of committing. Given her bizarre behavior, the court ordered a psychiatric evaluation to determine whether Christina was mentally fit to stand trial. If she were found to be suffering from severe mental illness, it could have significantly impacted her sentencing. However, the results of the psychiatric examination shocked many. The evaluation concluded that Christina was, in fact, sane. She was fully aware of her actions and understood the consequences of her behavior. Her strange demeanor in court, while disturbing, was not indicative of insanity, but rather suggested a calculated indifference to the suffering she had caused. The prosecution laid out a compelling case, detailing Christina's obsessive behavior toward Torny and the way her jealousy toward Emma had festered into violent rage. They highlighted how Christina had stalked the family, collected their photos, and plotted the attack. The evidence, including the surveillance footage, the threatening captions on the photos, and her presence near the crime scene painted a chilling picture of premeditated murder. Christina's defense team struggled to explain her actions. They argued that her long history of emotional instability and the heartbreak she had experienced after her breakup with Torny had driven her to commit the crime in a moment of irrationality. However, the evidence of her calculated planning and the fact that she had brought the murder weapon, a hammer, with her to the scene weakened their case. As the trial progressed, it became clear that Christina had meticulously planned the attack, and her obsession with Torny had led her to commit one of the most horrific crimes in recent Swedish history. Despite her claims of innocence and attempts to appear disconnected from the reality of the situation, the court found her guilty on all counts. In the end, Christina Schur was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murders of Max and Saga, and for the attempted murder of Emma Young Stig. The judge also ordered her to pay $20,000 in compensation to Emma, a small gesture of justice for a woman who had lost her children and suffered a life-changing attack. Christina's chilling lack of remorse throughout the trial left a lasting impression on all who witnessed the proceedings, marking her as one of the most cold-blooded criminals in Swedish history. For Emma and Torny, the conclusion of the trial marked the end of a long and painful chapter, but it also signaled the beginning of their journey toward healing. The emotional toll of the crime had been overwhelming for both of them, Emma had not only lost her two children, but had also come dangerously close to losing her own life. She had spent months in the hospital recovering from her severe injuries, undergoing multiple surgeries to repair the damage inflicted during the attack. The physical scars would remain with her forever, but the emotional wounds were even deeper. During her recovery, Emma faced the unimaginable grief of losing Max and Saga. For weeks after the attack, she was unable to fully comprehend what had happened. Each time she was told of her children's deaths, her mind seemed to block out the reality, unable to accept the loss. It was only after she was brought back to the scene of the crime that the memories came flooding back, and she was forced to confront the full horror of that night. Torny, too, was deeply affected by the events. He had lost Max and Saga, whom he had come to love as his own children, and had nearly lost Emma as well. The guilt of not being able to protect his family weighed heavily on him, even though he knew there was nothing he could have done to prevent the tragedy. In the aftermath of the attack, Torny remained a constant source of support for Emma, standing by her side as she navigated her physical and emotional recovery. Despite the overwhelming pain, Emma and Torny chose to move forward with their lives. The bond between them grew stronger as they leaned on each other for comfort and healing. In the summer of 2010, 2 years after the attack, they decided to honor their original plans and got married in a small, intimate ceremony. It was a bittersweet moment. While they celebrated their love and commitment to each other, the absence of Max and Saga was deeply felt. Their loss would always be a part of their lives, a wound that time could never fully heal. Over the years, Emma and Torny worked hard to rebuild their lives. Emma's recovery was long and arduous, but she gradually regained her strength. The couple eventually had 2 more children together, providing them with a renewed sense of hope and purpose. They were determined to create a loving and safe environment for their new family, though they made sure their children knew about Max and Saga, honoring their memory as part of their lives. While life could never return to what it had been before the tragedy, Emma and Torny found a way to move forward, building a new life out of the ashes of their past. Emma became an advocate for victims of violence, sharing her story with others in the hopes of raising awareness about the dangers of obsessive relationships and the importance of mental health intervention. Her strength and resilience in the face of unimaginable loss became an inspiration to many. For Emma and Torny, the journey to healing was long and painful, but they emerged stronger, their love and commitment to each other unshakable. Though the memory of Max and Saga would forever be a part of their lives, they found a way to honor their children's legacy while building a future for themselves and their new family. The verdict against Christina Scherer brought justice, but it was their own strength and resilience that allowed Emma and Torny to find peace and hope once again. As the trial concluded and Christina Scherer was sentenced, the emotional toll of this case remained deeply felt by everyone involved. The brutal murder of Max and Saga and the near-fatal attack on Emma Young-Stig left scars that would never fully heal. For Emma and Torny, the journey to recovery was long and filled with grief, but their resilience and strength allowed them to rebuild their lives, despite the unimaginable pain they had endured. This case serves as a tragic reminder of the dangerous consequences of obsession and unchecked mental health issues. It highlights how one person's unhealthy attachment can spiral into violence, tearing families apart and leaving devastation in its wake. Emma's story and her ability to find the courage to move forward is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for healing, even in the darkest of times. While justice was served with Christina's conviction, the heartbreak of losing 2 young lives will forever linger. As we reflect on the emotional impact of this case, it's important to remember that behind every crime, there are real people whose lives are forever altered. Their stories deserve to be told and remembered. Thank you for watching this episode and for allowing us to share Emma's tragic story. If you found this case as compelling as we did, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more true crime stories. We cover cases from around the world, delving into the minds of perpetrators and exploring the emotional and psychological toll these crimes take on victims and their loved ones. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video. In the quiet suburbs of Sweden, a young woman's life was brutally cut short, leaving a nation reeling and the world questioning. Saga Elneborg, a 20-year-old who was 7 months pregnant, was found murdered in her own apartment, a place that should have been a sanctuary as she awaited the birth of her child. The crime wasn't just heinous, it was profoundly unsettling. unraveling threads of cultural conflict, familial expectations, and the dangerous weight of societal pressures. This documentary delves deep into the events surrounding Saga's tragic death in April 2023, a case that has sparked heated debates across Sweden and beyond. Was it an act of personal betrayal, a crime fueled by cultural incompatibilities, or something far more sinister? At its heart lies a story that challenges our understanding of love, loyalty, and the lengths to which fear can drive a person. As we unravel this harrowing tale, we invite you, the audience, to examine the evidence, weigh the motives, and form your own judgment on a case that still echoes in the hearts of many. Saga was a 20-year-old woman brimming with hope and excitement for the future. At 7 months pregnant, she was eagerly anticipating the arrival of her baby boy, due in June 2023. Described by friends and family as kind, determined, and nurturing, Saga had embraced the challenges of young motherhood with a mature sense of responsibility. She had been in a relationship with her partner, Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, since the fall of 2021. Together, they planned to raise their child, despite the cultural and personal obstacles they faced. Saga's pregnancy brought her immense joy, and she often shared photos of her growing baby bump with friends and family. She took proactive steps to prepare for her new role as a mother, attending prenatal classes, researching childcare, and carefully curating a space for her child in their apartment. Saga's family stood by her through every step of the pregnancy, with her mother, Melissa Elneborg, often staying with her to help around the house and provide emotional support. Despite moments of anxiety, especially concerning Amin's hesitancy to reveal their relationship to his family, Saga remained optimistic and focused on the love she already felt for her unborn son. Tragically, Saga's dreams for the future would never come to fruition. Her life, filled with so much anticipation and promise, was cut short in an act of unfathomable violence, leaving her family and loved ones devastated and searching for answers. Saga Elneborg's days leading up to the tragedy were marked by both excitement for her baby's arrival and growing tension with her partner, Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim. Saga had been meticulously preparing for her new role as a mother and eagerly assembling baby gear, attending prenatal classes, and organizing her apartment for the baby's arrival. Her family, especially her mother, Melissa, provided steadfast support, staying with her intermittently to help during the pregnancy. Despite this strong familial backing, Saga's relationship with Amin faced mounting challenges. The primary source of tension stemmed from Amin's reluctance to reveal their relationship and Saga's pregnancy to his conservative Somali Muslim family. At 7 months pregnant, Saga was understandably anxious about her future and the family she hoped to build with Amin. For his part, Amin struggled with fears of rejection and dishonor from his family, who he believed would disapprove of the relationship due to cultural and religious differences. On April 28, 2023, Saga was last seen alive during a dinner outing at Mocha Deli with her family and friends. Though she tried to enjoy the evening, those close to her noticed she was distracted and visibly anxious. Amin had promised to inform his family that evening about their relationship, the baby, and their plan to move into a larger apartment together in the coming weeks. However, Saga's nervous glances at her phone and her short-clipped responses betrayed her unease. Later that evening, Saga decided to leave the gathering early and return to her apartment. Citing fatigue, she continued to message Amin late into the night, seeking reassurance that he had followed through with his promise. Unbeknownst to Saga, Amin had decided not to tell his family, drafting but ultimately failing to send a text admitting this to her. This failure to communicate likely deepened the existing strain in their relationship. What unfolded next remains uncertain, but Saga's return to her apartment marked the beginning of the final hours of her life. As she reached out to Amin for answers and support, events escalated in a way that would tragically end both her life and the life of her unborn child. On the afternoon of April 29, 2023, Melissa Elneborg arrived at her daughter Saga's apartment in Kungsgatan. It was supposed to be a routine visit to collect a few personal items, but from the moment she reached the door, something felt off. Melissa rang the doorbell, expecting Saga or her partner Amin to answer. When no one did, she knocked loudly, calling through the letterbox, but still there was silence. Growing anxious, she used her key to unlock the door, only to find it already unlocked. A strange occurrence, as Saga was always careful about locking up, even for brief errands. Melissa stepped into the apartment, greeted by an unsettling stillness. The kitchen faucet was running, which she quickly turned off, all the while calling out for Saga. Her voice echoed unanswered. With each step, dread built in her chest. Then as she entered the bedroom, she froze. Lying on the floor between the bed and the TV stand was Saga, motionless. Her long, dark hair obscured her face, but Melissa could see blood smeared across her daughter's features. A heavy marble tabletop, weighing nearly 30 kilograms, was pressed against her throat, and a lamp cord was loosely wound around her neck. Melissa screamed in horror, dropping to her knees. She was still on the phone with her other daughter, Julia, who could only listen helplessly to her mother's anguish. Desperately, Melissa lifted the marble tabletop off Saga's neck and called emergency services, but deep down, she already knew it was too late. When she tried CPR, she found Saga's body stiff and cold. Her daughter and her unborn grandson were gone. When the paramedics and police arrived, the scene they encountered was grim. Saga lay on her back, her head turned to the side, her arms by her body. Blood covered her face, particularly around her nose and mouth, and her tongue protruded slightly, a telltale sign of strangulation. Her left eye was swollen, and her dark hair was matted with dried blood. The marble tabletop had left deep impressions on her neck and thighs, as if it had been deliberately pressed down on her. Around her neck was the detached cord of a nearby lamp, though the lamp itself was undamaged, lying beneath her left shoulder. The rest of the apartment was in disarray, with drawers pulled out and clothes and jewelry scattered across the floor. At first glance, it appeared to be a robbery, but investigators quickly noted inconsistencies. Nothing valuable seemed to be missing, and there were no signs of forced entry. The scene appeared staged, pointing to a calculated attempt to mislead. The coroner's findings painted a chilling picture of Saga's final moments. She had been suffocated and strangled, likely first with the lamp cord and then with the crushing weight of the marble slab. The struggle was prolonged, lasting 5 to 10 agonizing minutes, during which Saga, heavily pregnant and unable to defend herself, would have been conscious for much of the attack. Her time of death was estimated to be between 1 and 3 a.m., hours before Melissa made the heart-wrenching discovery. As investigators pieced together the details, one thing became increasingly clear. The person responsible for this heinous act had to be someone who knew Saga well. There was no forced entry, and Saga, cautious as she was, wouldn't have let a stranger in during the late hours of the night. The staged robbery further suggested a level of familiarity and premeditation. Suspicion quickly turned toward Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, Saga's boyfriend and the father of her unborn child, setting the stage for a chilling investigation into a crime that would haunt Sweden for years to come. From the moment investigators arrived at Saga Elnaborg's apartment, suspicion quickly fell on Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, her boyfriend and the father of her unborn child. His connection to Saga, combined with his inconsistent behavior and troubling history, made him the primary person of interest in what rapidly became one of Sweden's most haunting murder investigations. When police contacted Mohammed Amin to inform him of a murder at Saga's address, his reaction immediately raised red flags. Despite being her partner and aware of her address, he initially claimed not to know the location. Instead of displaying shock or concern, Mohammed Amin seemed unnervingly calm, even making lighthearted remarks to the detectives. This odd response was compounded when, unprompted, he volunteered that he had an alibi for the night of April 28, 2023. Detectives found this statement peculiar, as they had not yet questioned him about his whereabouts during the murder. When pressed, Mohammed Amin maintained that he had not seen Saga since April 27, an assertion that would soon unravel under the weight of evidence. Mohammed Amin's demeanor throughout the investigation only deepened police suspicion. When told that Saga had been murdered, he denied any involvement, yet his responses were riddled with contradictions. Initially, he claimed ignorance of Saga's whereabouts in the crime scene itself. Yet when questioned further, he made a vague statement about being with a friend, Amir, during the time of the murder, a claim that would be scrutinized in the coming days. As detectives pieced together the timeline, Mohammed Amin's alibi began to crumble. Key evidence linking Mohammed Amin to the crime. Several pieces of evidence tied Mohammed Amin to the murder, painting a picture of premeditation and a staged cover-up. DNA evidence and forensic analysis revealed Mohammed Amin's DNA under Saga's fingernails and on her clothes. This indicated physical contact between them close to the time of her death. Mohammed Amin attempted to explain the presence of his DNA by claiming it was from consensual intimacy on April 27th. However, Saga was known for her meticulous hygiene, showering daily and washing her hands frequently, especially during her pregnancy. Experts concluded it was highly unlikely the DNA would have remained on her body for 2 days, further implicating Mohammed Amin. Phone records. Mohammed Amin's phone records placed him near Saga's apartment at the time of her murder, directly contradicting his claims of being elsewhere. Cell tower data showed his phone was active in the vicinity of her residence during the early hours of April 29th, precisely when the coroner estimated Saga's death. Between 12:22 a.m. and 1:57 a.m., his phone was inexplicably inactive, a period that coincided with the murder. Investigators noted this period of inactivity was highly unusual for Mohammed Amin, who was typically a frequent phone user. Additionally, his phone signal was recorded in motion near Saga's apartment, suggesting he had traveled to her location during the night. Deleted messages and calls. Investigators discovered that after the murder, Mohammed Amin had deleted text messages and call logs between himself and Saga. While he denied tampering with his phone, digital forensics recovered these deleted communications, which provided critical insights into their relationship. Among the retrieved texts were drafts of unsent messages where Mohammed Amin expressed reluctance to tell his family about Saga's pregnancy and their plans to move in together. The deletion of these exchanges was seen as a deliberate attempt to cover his tracks. The staged robbery and gang allegations. Mohammed Amin alleged that Saga's murder was the result of gang violence. He claimed to have angered a group of criminals who had ransacked Saga's apartment and killed her in retaliation. However, this theory quickly fell apart. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry, and while drawers were pulled out and jewelry scattered, nothing valuable was missing. The chaotic scene appeared staged, designed to mislead investigators. Additionally, Mohammed Amin's friends testified that he had no known gang affiliations, and there was no evidence linking him to organized crime. His story lacked credibility and further implicated him as the primary suspect. Unmatched footprint. A single footprint found at the crime scene did not match Mohammed Amin, briefly raising the possibility of another individual's involvement. However, no evidence of a second suspect emerged, and the footprint alone could not exonerate him. Investigators considered it a minor inconsistency in an otherwise compelling case against Mohammed Amin. As detectives delved deeper into Mohammed Amin's past, they uncovered a history of troubling behavior. Text messages from late 2022 revealed he had once asked a friend to harm Saga, specifically suggesting they kick her stomach to induce a miscarriage. Additionally, internet searches from his phone included queries like, "Can fetuses die from kicking?" This disturbing history cast a sinister shadow over Mohammed Amin's relationship with Saga and provided a potential motive for the murder. Mohammed Amin's DNA, his phone records, and his inconsistent alibi placed him at the scene of the crime. His attempt to stage the apartment as a robbery, combined with the deletion of incriminating messages and the implausibility of his gang violence story, pointed to a calculated effort to evade responsibility. While the unmatched footprint left room for speculation, investigators concluded it was a minor detail compared to the overwhelming circumstantial evidence against him. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Mohammed Amin had both the motive and opportunity to commit the crime, leading to his arrest and eventual trial. The trial of Mohammed Amin Abdurrazak Ibrahim unfolded under the glare of public and media scrutiny, as prosecutors and defense lawyers clashed over his alleged role in the murder of Saga Elneborg and their unborn child. The case was fraught with emotional and cultural complexities, and though much of the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecution painted a damning portrait of a man cornered by fear and societal pressures. The prosecution's case. Prosecutors began by establishing Mohammed Amin's motive. They argued that his actions were driven by a deep fear of dishonoring his conservative Somali Muslim family. For nearly 7 months, he had hidden his relationship with Saga and her pregnancy from them, aware that they might disapprove of his having a child out of wedlock with a Swedish Christian woman. As Saga's due date approached, the pressure mounted. His refusal to tell his family about the baby or commit to Saga created a volatile situation. Prosecutors suggested that, feeling trapped and desperate to avoid both familial rejection and the responsibilities of fatherhood, Mohammed Amin saw no way out but to end both Saga's life and the life of their unborn son. To bolster their argument, the prosecution presented chilling evidence of premeditation. Text messages recovered from Mohammed Amin's phone showed that months before the murder, he had suggested harming Saga's pregnancy. In one text, he asked a friend to kick her belly to induce a miscarriage. Internet searches on his phone revealed questions such as, can fetuses die from kicking? These findings painted a dark picture of a man who had contemplated extreme measures to escape his circumstances long before the tragedy unfolded. Prosecutors also pointed to Muhammad Amin's suspicious behavior in the aftermath of Saga's death. They argued that his immediate denial of involvement, coupled with his claim of an alibi before being questioned, suggested a rehearsed story. The crime scene itself further incriminated him. Drawers had been pulled out and items were scattered, yet nothing valuable was missing, and there were no signs of forced entry. Prosecutors asserted that Muhammad Amin had staged the scene to look like a robbery, but had failed to convincingly disguise the crime. The inconsistencies in the staging only deepened suspicion. Cell tower data provided another key piece of evidence. While Muhammad Amin claimed he was elsewhere during the time of Saga's murder, phone records placed him near her apartment during the critical hours. His phone activity ceased during the estimated time of death, and both his and his friend Amir's phones were turned off simultaneously. A suspicious coincidence that prosecutors argued indicated a deliberate effort to conceal his actions. Additionally, Muhammad Amin's deletion of text messages and call logs from Saga in the hours following the murder suggested he was trying to cover his tracks. DNA evidence, though not definitive, added to the prosecution's case. Muhammad Amin's DNA was found under Saga's fingernails and on her clothes, consistent with a physical struggle. The prosecution highlighted Saga's known hygiene habits, arguing that the DNA was recent and likely deposited during the fatal encounter. The defense's case. The defense countered by focusing on gaps in the prosecution's case, emphasizing the lack of direct evidence tying Muhammad Amin to the murder. They pointed to an unmatched footprint found at the scene, arguing it suggested the possibility of another perpetrator. They also challenged the DNA evidence, claiming it could have come from consensual contact days earlier. The defense cast doubt on the prosecution's claim that the DNA was recent, stating there was no definitive timeline to link it to the night of the murder. Regarding motive, the defense rejected the idea that Muhammad Amin's cultural background and fear of family dishonor were strong enough to drive him to murder. They argued there was no proof his family was even aware of Saga's pregnancy or that they would have reacted negatively if they had known. Without concrete evidence of familial pressure, the motive was speculative at best. Throughout the trial, Muhammad Amin maintained his innocence, portraying himself as a victim of circumstantial assumptions. He insisted he loved Saga and their unborn child and accused the police of rushing to judgment without exploring alternative suspects or motives. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the case rested on the interpretation of circumstantial evidence. The prosecution's narrative was clear and cohesive, painting Muhammad Amin as a man who was trapped by fear and cultural expectations, leading him to commit a calculated act of violence. The defense, however, worked to highlight every gap and ambiguity, planting seeds of reasonable doubt wherever possible. The decision would hinge on the court's ability to connect the circumstantial dots and determine whether they were sufficient to convict. As both sides presented their final arguments, the weight of justice for Saga and her unborn child hung in the balance, leaving the court and the nation to grapple with one of Sweden's most harrowing cases. After months of investigation and a trial that gripped the nation, Swedish prosecutors presented a compelling case against Muhammad Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, securing his conviction for the brutal murder of Saga Elneborg and her unborn child. While much of the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecution meticulously wove it into a damning narrative, leaving little doubt about Muhammad Amin's guilt. The cornerstone of the case was the alignment of DNA and phone records with the timeline of Saga's murder. DNA evidence found under Saga's fingernails and on her clothing strongly indicated physical contact during the critical hours of April 29, 2023. Although Muhammad Amin claimed the DNA was from consensual contact 2 days earlier, forensic experts dismissed this, noting Saga's meticulous hygiene habits. Furthermore, phone records placed Muhammad Amin near Saga's apartment during the estimated time of her death, contradicting his alibi. Investigators pointed to his phone's inactivity during the murder window, as well as the simultaneous shutdown of both his and his friend Amir's phones, as evidence of a deliberate attempt to conceal his actions. Equally damning were Muhammad Amin's behavioral inconsistencies during police interrogations. From the outset, his demeanor raised red flags. When informed of a murder at Saga's apartment, he feigned ignorance about her address, even though it was her primary residence and where their child would soon be born. His unnerving calmness, coupled with his unsolicited claim of an alibi before being asked about his whereabouts, suggested premeditation. Additionally, his deletion of text messages and call logs from Saga in the hours following her murder further pointed to his efforts to cover his tracks. Throughout the trial, Mohammed Amin's defense attempted to cast doubt on the evidence, proposing alternative theories, including one involving gang retaliation. He claimed criminals had broken into Saga's apartment and killed her over a dispute related to alleged contraband he had handled. However, the court found no evidence to support this claim. The lack of forced entry, combined with the staged robbery scene, dismantled the credibility of his argument. Investigators noted that nothing valuable was taken, and Saga would not have willingly let strangers into her home late at night. Additionally, testimony from Mohammed Amin's own friends refuted his claims of gang involvement, further undermining his defense. The court was ultimately persuaded by the prosecution's argument that Mohammed Amin's actions were driven by his personal fears and cultural pressures. As a Somali Muslim raised in a conservative family, he had hidden his relationship with Saga and her pregnancy from his relatives. Prosecutors argued that he feared rejection and dishonor if his family discovered that he was expecting a child out of wedlock with a Swedish Christian woman. Trapped by this looming reality, Mohammed Amin saw violence as his only escape, choosing to eliminate Saga and their unborn child rather than face the consequences. On June 5, 2024, the court delivered its verdict. Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Saga Elnaborg and her unborn son. In their decision, the judges labeled the crime honor-related, shaped by Mohammed Amin's personal fear of ostracization and his inability to reconcile his family's cultural expectations with his relationship. They concluded that his actions were premeditated, calculating, and ultimately driven by a warped sense of self-preservation. The conviction brought a measure of justice for Saga's grieving family. Her mother, Melissa, who had discovered her daughter's lifeless body, expressed relief that the truth had prevailed, though the loss remained unbearable. The tragedy sparked national conversations about honor-related crimes and the devastating impact of cultural and societal pressures. Many hoped Saga's story would serve as a warning, highlighting the need for greater awareness and protections for those caught in similar situations. While Mohammed Amin's life sentence ensured he would never harm another, the echoes of Saga's life and untimely death lingered. Her family and friends remembered her as a young woman full of hope and love, eagerly preparing for the birth of her son. Though justice was served, it could never bring back what was lost, 2 innocent lives taken far too soon. The case of Saga Elnaborg and her unborn child shines a harsh light on the complex and often uncomfortable challenges that arise at the intersection of cultural assimilation, honor-related violence, and interpersonal relationships. It exposes the fragility of individuals caught between two worlds, the expectations of traditional cultural values and the realities of living in a modern, progressive society. For Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, these pressures collided in a way that ended in unspeakable tragedy. This case raises profound questions about how cultural and familial pressures can influence extreme behaviors. Mohammed Amin's fear of rejection and dishonor within his conservative Somali Muslim family drove him to conceal his relationship with Saga and ultimately commit an unthinkable act. His actions were not just about personal choices, but were deeply rooted in a fear of cultural ostracization and the weight of societal judgment. This dynamic highlights the silent but powerful role that cultural expectations can play in shaping individual decisions, often with devastating consequences. At its core, this tragedy underscores the need for society to confront systemic issues that contribute to such outcomes. Greater efforts are required to create spaces where open dialogue and support systems can bridge cultural divides and alleviate the pressures of conflicting values. Education, community outreach, and stronger social frameworks can help individuals navigate the complexities of multicultural identities without resorting to violence or extreme measures. Saga's story is not an isolated incident, but a painful reminder of the work that remains to ensure that cultural differences do not escalate into life-shattering tragedies. By addressing the root causes, fear, stigma, and the lack of understanding, we can hope to prevent similar events in the future. Her life and death call for a society that values compassion over judgment, inclusivity over exclusion, and humanity over tradition. The documentary invites viewers to reflect on these themes and engage in meaningful discussions about how cultural assimilation and conflicting values can sometimes lead to tragedy. What role does societal pressure play in shaping individual actions? How can communities and institutions work together to prevent such crimes in the future? These questions are not only relevant to this case, but to many others across the globe where cultural divides create silent but dangerous rifts. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your perspectives in the comments below. Let's spark a meaningful dialogue on how we can create a more understanding and inclusive world. If you found this story impactful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime documentaries. Together, let's uncover stories that matter.